Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video going over my 10 general tips for playing on the new content that we're getting in the Eldritch Realms expansion and the free update for Age of Wonders 4, both of which are coming out on June 18th. Big thank you to Paradox Interactive and Triumph Studios for sending me a free press copy for Age of Wonders 4 Eldritch Realms and for including me in the early coverage of this expansion. I've been working a lot on this video and I'm very excited to share my insights with you. All right, without further ado, my first tip is to not be afraid to enthrall your own pops for early knowledge. You want to try and set up an early city like I am doing over here so that we can cast the enthrall pop spell on that city in a few turns. But I found that I actually was ready to cast my first spell on my capital after 5 turns because I was able to clear out a couple of nodes using the expansion from my city, and I was able to get one extra thrall than what I started with. You start the game with 2 thralls, but that's not quite enough to use the dark knowledge ritual. In order to get the 4 thralls that you're going to need, you're probably going to need to use enthrall population on your capital or one of your first captured cities. I know a lot of people will say never enthrall your own pops. That's a waste of your own population, and you could be getting thralls from fights or from free cities, but I think that this is pretty efficient. And when you compare it to another great source of early game knowledge, this requires Imperium to get a lot of knowledge for defeated heroes in combat, which means, yes, you need to spend the Imperium on this, but also you have to go find heroes that you can go kill in combat. And if you're being aggressive to free cities, if you have a couple free cities near you that you can go kill to get that knowledge, that's great. That should come online relatively quickly. You may have a lot of Shadow Affinity and be able to get this in the first like 5 or 10 turns of the game. But I think being able to just enthrall your own pops from the very beginning is very safe and efficient. And then if you combine that with the extra knowledge that you gain from the shadow perk that we were just looking at, I think you're going to have greater knowledge income than any other faction in the game. And I really like combining the dark ritual with this build in particular. If we take a closer look at the farming goblins that I made here, I decided to give them prolific swarmers so that it takes less time to grow the cities. That worked well in my capital because I had extra pops to play around with a little bit quicker, but it's also going to work well in my extra cities because they're going to be able to grow back up to 2 or 3 pops relatively quickly, so I can just enthrall pops whenever I am not casting Dark Ritual. You need the 4 things. This is a pretty expensive spell. It costs 150 casting points, so as you can see here, I'm not going to be able to cast this for 2 turns, which means I won't be able to enthrall pops, and I wouldn't want to enthrall pops until this is complete with its casting and I have the knowledge from it. The other neat thing about this build that I have here is the Adept Settlers means that you can set up your cities a little bit quicker, and not only that, they'll have an extra pop that you can use with this whole Enthrall pop interaction. So before we move on to the second tip, I wanted to showcase what this general strategy here will look like around turn 18. I was actually able to complete my second tier 1 tome to get to tier 2 tomes by turn 18 by just, spamming the enthrall pop on this city for the most part. And then when I had enough thralls, I would then use the dark ritual, which must have given me around 400 to 600 knowledge, because if we go into my tome library, the first tome that I have here, I completed all these researches by turn 10, and then I was able to complete these 3 and maybe one of the other base ones that's relatively cheap in those 8 turns. So as you can see, this is 400 research, 400 research, 400 research. I'm only making about 100 right now, so probably closer to 90 over the past 8 turns. That's only like 700 or so research. So I'm actually getting a considerable amount of my research. Almost half of my research is just coming from this one interaction. My next tip is to shut down support and ranged units using the new Death Beetle's Pestilent Escape. It says right here that adjacent enemies sustain damage. They also have a chance to gain weakened. It kind of says that at the end. It says there's a 90% chance for them to get weakened for 3 turns. But the best part about this is that it lets you move away from where you did an attack and then enter defense mode, which is really, really, really good on shield units. It's really good on support units, although I don't think a lot of support units are mounted. I can't think of one off the top of my head, the Animist. But yeah, just check out what I can do with all of these units. They can all reach here. Well, most of them can reach there, and then they can go all around these ranged units. I can say, hey, you, maybe don't stand next to the melee guy that's going to get 3 attacks. Stand over here, and then that guy is now kind of locked in place. And then I can go over here and say, hey, you, I would like you to either be next to another guy who's warding, or I'd like you to stand over here. The really neat thing about standing on 2 sides of a unit is that that can keep a unit from moving at all. Right now, this unit can kind of wiggle away because he doesn't have a unit that's kind of blocking this path. He could go there, but he can't get out of that direction. So basically, one thing I like to do with this is park on 2 sides. Like right now, the second side of this unit, the best location if you were just looking at this unit would be to go right here, but that unfortunately will give this guy 3 attacks and this guy 3 attacks onto that hex. So I think instead I'll just kind of like I can't go into the middle. I think I'll just weaken and play this guy here so that he can't get attacked by both the spider and that one. I'll probably end up doing that with everybody. Nobody should be ending their turn right here, but as you can see, these guys are going to be incapable of doing any real amount of damage, and I will have blocked off so much of their ability to position. Like this guy's effectively just dead, and he hasn't done anything. He hasn't taken any damage whatsoever. The other neat thing about these beetles that I really like is you can put goblins on beetles like in one of the previous games. I don't think you can put hideous stench and put them on beetles, which may have been how the goblins worked in like Age of Wonders 1 or Age of Wonders 2, but I really like that you have this for roleplay mechanics, and it's really, really strong in combat. Another good use of the Pestilent Escape is to say, hey, instead of standing next to my enemies, I could just bring my guys further back to where they started the battle and make it so that all of my enemies have to walk towards me. If you're not facing off against a lot of range, if you're facing a lot of melee, it may be better to just park your guys in a line so that they're all supporting each other. Of course, you don't want to do something like this if they got charged because he just presented his flank to him. But I think what I want to do here is actually show off a very easy to miss part on the Death Beetle, which is that there is no cooldown on this Pestilent Escape. All these guys in the back, although they're in position to want to use triple attacks here, like why wouldn't you just take the triple attack here, 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 and then like here, 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 just to kill off this unit, right? Well, I guess because he's already like effectively dead. But one thing I could do with all these other units is I can say, hey, it's time to do another Pestilent Escape here, like that, and this guy can do the same. Let's park him over just near our other friends over here. That way he can do some shield wall, and now we have access to bring in other units if we wanted to get in the AoE here. And yeah, that's not bad at all. The warrior tier 1 shield unit is not the only unit in the barbarian lineup that gets the Death Beetle mount. The Fury also gets it, and he benefits a lot from this reposition ability. The fact that it puts you in defense mode and you don't get a shield wall or warding is actually perfectly okay, because when a Fury gets locked into zone of control, it can't use its primary attack, meaning being able to just maneuver away so you can use your shoot bow on the next turn is very valuable, and it also can allow your other units to maybe save a ranged unit that was in a lot of danger or could have been otherwise killed. There are a lot of other units across the other cultures that I think benefit a lot from this. I think the dark culture in general benefits a lot from the weaken AoE, but they don't have a lot of optional cav. I think the pursuers will have a nice melee, kind of like the furies that will allow them to get away. So that is a nice thing for the dark culture to have. I was writing in my notes earlier that I think barbarians focus a lot on a strong alpha strike, so further reducing damage through the weekend is very valuable. And these mounted heroes will also be able to use the ability, so they can also apply the damage reduction maybe a little bit more safely than, say, the pursuers in the dark culture could. Our next tip has to do with Ritual of Alacrity. This is a barbarian mechanic. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is something that was always amazing in Age of Wonders 4, but I think it just got a lot better for two main reasons. I think it has really interesting interactions with the new Umbral Abyss layer, and I also think with the changes to experience, you're going to want to get XP on your tier 1 units as fast as humanly possible without losing the units. If you lose the tier 1 units, then you're losing a lot of the value that you get from clearing and using the Ritual of Alacrity. But yeah, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, we can use Ritual of Alacrity every 3 turns on a city or outpost. So right now, this wouldn't be a great use of this unit's Ritual of Alacrity, but I did want to show that you can build this on the same province that has the gate to make it easier for you to go clear out nodes. Like I just cleared a node down here and all my guys are pretty beat up, so it would be nice to take them back up here to the outpost and then to build directly on it. I believe, yeah, this guy is in the same province. Just wanted to double check that before we commit too much to this thought process. So yeah, now he's done the Ritual of Alacrity. Not only did he heal a bunch of HP, it doesn't heal all, it heals 50%. He gets all of the movement points back. So healing keeps your units alive, but the movement points keeps them moving across the map, taking on as many fights as humanly possible. And I think if you're playing the new Sovereign, that will give you more thralls. So it's really, really just a powerful interaction, especially when you consider that you can use this Ritual of Alacrity with the special Sanctuary Outpost provinces, which you can build after you defeat either something like this Umbral Dwelling or like an Umbral Nest. And after that, that space becomes something that your guys can basically avoid the Umbral Malady in. As you can see, this guy, he's suffering a passive loss of HP, 6 HP points every turn. But one way to get around that is by having this unit just stand inside the borders of the sanctuary. Another way to deal with that is to just use the Ritual of Alacrity to heal off the damage that's slowly chipped off of the unit. If you have a lot of HP on a unit, the little bit of chip that happens every turn isn't a giant deal. And I think for that reason, people will end up probably trying to not use Umbral Flesh if they have the Ritual of Alacrity. They'll just use that to keep their units topped up so that they can go around these nodes and try and clear them out for some early game advantages, as much as possible, as early as possible. While you can choose to start with Umbral Flesh, and I do think that is going to be quite popular and quite powerful, I don't think it makes sense to start with the Umbral Disciples thing that gives you the Umbral Flesh with Barbarians, because I think they kind of both do similar things. But at the same time, if this lets you just go into the Umbral Abyss and start clearing, that could be very good. At the same time, you don't want to leave yourself too vulnerable too early, because other people might see that and take advantage of it. I think if I saw a Barbarian with Umbral Flesh, I'd probably try and attack them while they're in the early game and they're trying to clear nodes. My next tip is, if you don't feel like using barbarians to try and clear the Umbral Abyss, you should try and counter it with this build, which I like to call Order Demons, aka the kir'ko. If you've seen Age of Wonders Planetfall before, you've probably seen that they had this insectoid looking race that was based off of the Shadow Demons in Age of Wonders 2. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to turn the insectoid form into an order version and just see how it fared in the Umbral Abyss. I really like the high culture with the Umbral Disciples and Runesmith because it gives you really high quality shield and pole arm units, as well as a lot of access to spirit damage, which these umbral creatures are just generally weak to. This guy, he's also weak to it. He's not weak to it, but they're not umbral creatures. This guy, he's an umbral creature. He's got the tag that says they're a little bit weak to spirit damage and fire damage. They have a little bit more resistance. So if you can do magic damage, which, the High Culture's Awakening does allow a lot of your units to do a little bit of that, then these fights are generally going to be a lot easier. As you can see, I only have 100 more strength in here, and this is a very scary unit. So the fact that I'm able to just press auto combat and only lose 2 units here is not bad at all. If I waited another turn or two, I could probably not lose any units here. I just wanted to prove how quickly you can actually clear out an Umbral Nest with auto combats. This is done just, no cheat codes, no nothing, just clearing the map the basic way. And as you can see here, we now have this beacon of light that we can turn into an outpost. Now let's go over the rest of this build very quickly. We have Death Beetle mounts. That's the new thing that lets our guys reposition and stay safe if they're a little bit more beat up. We have Tough, which allows them to deal with the physical damage that I think a lot of the just Umbral unit types have. This guy, he does physical damage. This guy does a mix of physical and magical. But yeah, I think in general, the lower tier ones at least do mostly physical damage. So having that extra armor means that your guys can stay alive a little bit more easily. They can keep dealing damage a little bit more easily. I forget how the Awakened works with models, but I think the extra damage you get from the Awakened, it doesn't go down with lost models, but it also activates dormant traits, which makes the shield units better. It allows your supports to apply distracting, which is just like so good. When an enemy is distracted, they're flying to, which means they take a lot of damage. And then what else is there to like about this build? Oh, right, the leader is a champion, which means that you're able to get units out there a little bit more quickly. I think we go here, you can kind of see that he's not a wizard king. He is a regular old champion, which I think gives you a little bit of gold boost, a little bit of draft boost, which means you can get your tier 1 units, your Dawn Defenders out a little bit more quickly, and they can just start clearing things. I think I took Tome of Pyromancy with this one. I think I'm seeing that here in my notes. And that's another thing that these fire creatures are just generally weak to. I got this nice spell which will inflict burning on a unit. So if you put on a high tier unit, very good. Pyromancers are going to be very nice here because I think the Umbral guys kind of focus a lot on swarm mechanics. So being able to hit them with an AoE that sets them on fire is quite valuable. Yeah, I think we'll skip forward a few turns to show you the second Umbral Nest that I cleared with. Right, I should probably show off the basic realm settings here. Normal difficulty, I tend to play on normal difficulty. You could turn it up, you could turn it down, and change things a little bit here. If it's higher difficulty, you just get more XP on your units, and the first few fights, while they might be harder, it'll make the rest of them easier eventually. So as you can see here, it didn't take me that long to find and move over to a second Umbral Nest. This is the one that we just saw from turn 6, and we're on turn 11. Let's see how the AI handles this fight. We're slightly stronger than what they have. They have a tier 4, a couple tier 2s, so let's cross our fingers and hope. Yeah, for no losses. That's pretty good results considering how good this new unit is. I think it's got a lot of very powerful effects on it. So yeah, this is a pretty good just auto clearing build. I'm sure it'd be better in manual combat, but yeah, I like it for auto combat. My next tip for you all is to make sure you focus on tier 1 units, at least in the early to mid game. With the changes to XP medals, shield units and support units will be able to give bolstering defense and resistance with their defense modes 1 rank earlier than they used to be able. It used to be that you'd get things like Exalted Defense when they were on their legend rank. Now legend rank is just like HP, armor, resistance, and extra damage. It's almost like taking it up to the next tier of strength. When you get to elite, it's almost like turning a tier 1 into a tier 2, and then when you get to legend, it's almost like that tier 1 acts like as good as a tier 3 with little or no experience on it. Now, if we hover over Exalted Defense here, we'll be able to see that it gives us, where is it? It's this one, right? There's the medal for elite. Where's Exalted Defense? There it is. Exalted Defense says when you enter defense mode, adjacent friendly units get the bolstered defense. The same will happen when you get your support units past elite rank and to their champion rank. Then they get the exalted resistance. That's very powerful, being able to put those buffs on units that are just simply standing next to your support and defense units are really good. But this also means things like this archer are going to get their metal bonuses a little bit earlier. So this one gets +1 range on their physical attacks when they get up to champion rank. That means that this archer might be something that you can actually use for quite a bit longer than in previous versions of Age of Wonders 4. I almost never built ranged units, tier 1 ranged units. I mostly build the shield units because they end up supporting my heroes and my battle mages more effectively than an archer can deal damage. It is also worth noting that the XP required to get to the next rank is different depending on the tier of the unit, but the bonuses are all pretty much the same. I mean, you get different champion medals for different units, but you get the +10 XP at soldier rank regardless of if you're looking at a tier 2 or if you're looking at a tier 1. But if I go here and I look at its current XP, this tier 2 unit is sitting at 53 of 60, which is different than this elite unit. They reach champion rank at 40 experience, whereas this one reaches champion rank at 60 experience. And I'm not quite sure if I get that. I think that it would make sense if they had the same thresholds to get to the same bonuses, because it costs more to get the higher tier units. You're going to be paying higher upkeep, and you're going to be paying higher draft or maybe casting points and mana to get these higher tier units. So I think if they are getting the same benefits from the level up, it makes sense that it costs just as much to get there. Another interesting thing to note about the tier 1 interactions is that it elevates certain tomes to be a lot better than what they used to be. I think a lot of people were saying Tome of the Horde is only good in certain very specific situations, like if you're in a small map and you're going to be getting into fights relatively early. But this is all about making your tier 1 units really good, really strong. This here skill alone makes them survive auto combat a whole lot more, and then spawnkin, just going to be amazing. Having that extra evasion and damage, and the way the formations work is pretty minor, but the damage and the evasion is going to be really good at keeping your units alive and able to go clear out fights a lot quicker. On a similar note, I think evolution just got a whole lot better. I think that the slip away on evolution units for the Tome of Evolution, which is, it's going to be underneath this same category, isn't it? Because it's mixed. It's a dual affinity thing. Yeah, so the slip away effect that you can get on the rapid evolution enchantment is massive. It not only benefits your slithers and your wyverns, but if you've got things like the fire elemental that evolves, that will keep them alive in combat a lot more easily. So yeah, if you combine the benefit for tier 1 units on Tome of the Horde with this one on your slithers, they're all of a sudden like +3 defense, +2 resistance, and I think they have some other thing like HP, like +5 HP from Tome of the Horde. So that's very good. You're not probably gonna want 3 tier 1 tomes, so this next one is kind of like an alternative pick, but I think Tome of the Necromancy giving you access to skeletons just got a lot better, because a lot of people are saying skeletons just don't perform well enough to be worth it. But I think if it allows you to take on fights a little bit more easily, then that could be worth it. Of course, if you're putting experience on the skeletons just for them to go die, that's a giant waste of very valuable experience, and that's not worth doing. I still need to play around more with skeletons. I want to see how they perform in multiplayer before I like form a strong opinion on them, because in theory I think it sounds really good being able to say, hey, we just lost a lot of units, now we have more units is great, but if they start off with no experience, I don't know how terribly useful that will be. And then the other thing that has to do with tier 1 units and tomes is actually a tier 2 tome, one of my favorite tomes in the game, one that I've just more recently became aware of how powerful it is. Mighty Meek is amazing. You get your tier 1 units plus 1 spear damage on for each tier. It means when you're fighting a hero that's like plus 10 damage, because it counts well, if you use a single action attack like an Arbalest shot or a Slither's shot, then it's double the +5 that you would usually get for a repeating attack on a hero. I think if you attack a tier 1 unit, it's just +1 spirit damage. Tier 2 unit is +2 spirit damage. A tier 3 unit is +3 spirit damage. All those get doubled if you're using something like the Slither's single action ranged attack. And then for whatever reason, heroes are counted like I think a tier 5 unit for these types of calculations, which makes this just like the best hero killing skill in the game, as long as you're still using tier 1 units. And honestly, it makes it so that you can keep using tier 1 units through the mid and potentially even the late game with these changes to experience medals. I didn't actually try out the combination of Scions of Evil with Runesmiths, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it's just as good as it used to be, if not a lot better, because this will allow you to make your tier 1 shield units just phenomenal right out of the gate. If you can make it so that you're actually not just a little evil, but like very evil, then you can all of a sudden make it so that you're getting, I think, more than just +1 rank on your units. You're getting, I think, +2 ranks on your shock and shield units, whereas everything else is just going to be +1 rank for being maximum evil alignment. Sure, it's kind of hard to get to pure evil. -100 alignment will take you some time to get there, but I think that plus Runesmith giving you um, basically 2 ranks on your shield units at the very beginning of the game, and then 3 ranks on those tier 1 shield units will make it so it's very easy for you to just pump out very viable units very quickly to go either attack um, other players or to go clear the map. My next tip will be to use the Call to Chaos Empire skill to get some strong tier 2 and tier 3 units early in the game. While I know I just spent a bunch of time talking about how tier 1 units with medals will be amazing, some of the tier 2 and tier 3 units just have really neat abilities and interactions, and getting access to them can be pretty powerful, especially if you get them early enough to actually put some levels on them, because I know that one of the changes to the experience was intended to make the tier 3 battle mages viable for longer. So if you wanted to put some experience on them, you can keep using them against the higher tier units. I'm pretty sure that this wild expansion would work the same way, but by the time you unlock it, you probably already have the higher tier town hall in your capital. And one of the neat things about Call to Chaos is you won't have to make that building in your city to actually get those higher tier units on the map. Right here, I have one that lets me build the tier 2 units. Um, this one allows you to just build tier 2 units, the second level of town hall, and then the third hall would let you not only make the awakeners but be able to use tier 3 units from the tomes. I think until I build this building, I can't use things like the Scald from the Chaos Affinity. So we're just going to use this cheat code here to unlock every tome in the game to showcase that with the current infrastructure, we can only build tier 2 units. We can't build tier 3 units, but when I go into here, there is a possibility that you can get a tier 3 unit. I know I saw it the other day, so let's see if we can make that happen. Right, we don't need this. That's from one of the tomes I just unlocked. Yeah, it's giving me a tier 2 warlock, which is not bad because this guy has the umbral stuff. He's, I think, got the gloom strider thing and the umbral flesh. So a pretty good unit in general, but let's show off the tier 3 I got. I'm not sure why I was having so much trouble generating the flesh abomination that I was able to get to generate earlier, but I do see from this that I just cleared out a node which gives me a berserker. This is a tier 3 unit that I wouldn't be able to make in my capital because I don't have the building that allows me to get to those higher tier units just yet. Oh, I don't have master skills on. Let me just pop that on. So as you can see here, when I go into the building, I wouldn't be able to make those tier 3 units, but I can get them through Call to Chaos. A pretty neat little interaction. I did mention it earlier, but I did want to show off that Wild Expansion works the same way, although I don't see this being something you get online early enough to use to just generate the tier 3 units. I do think this should work theoretically. Yeah, was that a tier 3 unit there? That looks like a tier 3. Yeah, you can get tier 3 units from this interaction, even though you won't be able to summon them and you won't be able to build them in your city without the tier 3 town hall. My next tip is to be aware that there are a lot more mind control effects in the game with the addition of the new sovereign ruler types and the new umbral units in the Eldritch Realms expansion. There are also a lot of very scary umbral related status effects that you need to be aware of. So getting extra status resistance or mitigating ways to lower your status resistance, like you can lower it through sundering resistance. I think this guy, he can lower status resistance with his javelin. It's kind of hard to see, but there it is. It can lower status resistance. You can get around this by bolstering your defenses with like the shield units. We talked about that earlier in the video. But yeah, getting back to this guy, the mind control here is something that all the sovereigns are going to get access to at the very beginning of the game, and it's not as powerful as other mind control effects. Things like the nymph, I believe they can dominate a unit until the end of the battle. Same with the Lightbringer. Whereas this is mind controlled for one turn and one turn only. If you fail the mind control, they're going to lose all of their actions, which is pretty good if you can target a unit that is going to deal a lot of damage to you on the next turn. If you can take away all their actions, then it's not a big deal that you don't have the mind control. Of course, if you can mind control them and use that damage against their allies, that's massive, that's big. But you need to keep in mind that where you position them at the end of that turn where you have mind controlled them is important because they're not sticking with you until the end of the battle. They're only on your side for one turn. Now let's take a closer look at the different types of mind controls that you might see on sovereigns other than the Eldritch mind control. They also have this Eldritch Truth ability, which inflicts madness, which is very similar to Insanity, but they also receive 5 physical damage each turn. And if this is unsuccessful, then the unit is insane. So that's a pretty good fail condition. But when you compare it to this is just mad. Um, and I think that would be mad until the end of combat versus insane for one turn. This is a much better effect. If it only lasts for one turn, taking 5 damage is like not that big of a difference versus the insanity here. The other thing that you get from the Mindbreaker skill, other than the Eldritch Truth here, is the Eldritch Breach, which lets you get past status resistance. As we talked about, you may want to add extra status resistance to get around the mind control effects off of units like this. I believe there's something called Delirium that we can pick in here that also inflicts insanity. Yeah, this is insanity for one turn. So that's 3 that the ruler can get access to pretty early on. One that they're guaranteed access to, the Eldritch thing. There's the Mindbreaker, that's only a level 4 thing. Delirium it's a novice hero skill, so not only does it inflict insanity, it also sunders defense, sunders resistance, making it pretty easy to pick off that unit if you wanted to. And I can't remember if there is an advanced delirium, but I think it's just that one from the mind control effects that you can get in here. There's stun, that's not that different from a mind control. You get the ability to reduce status resistance through this thing, so that has some synergy there. But yeah, I think we can look at more of these hero skills now. So we've seen a couple of this stuff before. Now that we have Mindbreaker, we can consider trying to hex people, which, yeah, not mind control. Blessing is good for your own guys. Pestilence would be, I think, a way to, yeah, get more sundered resistance, aka lower the resistance. And I'm not seeing anything in this that would affect their their ability to mind control people. Whereas when you get to level 12, that's like an upgrade to this mind breaker, which is the mind controlling thing. So you can either gain manipulator, so these can now target within 3 hexes of the initial target, so you can mind control 2 units with your mind control. See, there are a lot more mind controls in the game. You can get a lot of value out of that. Or you can get mind rend, which says deal 70% more damage against targets afflicted with either madness, insanity, despair, or berserk, or other mental negative stat effects. I'm not sure what the rest of the list is, but I don't see how this is better than Enthrall. I think you take Enthrall pretty much every time if you're going for uh, Mindbreaker. And then I believe in here these things are yeah, they're not going to help you with the mind control, or they're not going to actually have you mind control. They might help you with mind control. It's just an upgrade to the other versions of these skills that we saw on the left. I know when I looked things up in the encyclopedia here, I was able to get a list of the Umbral units that have like the really cool stats effects pretty quickly by just going Umbral Demons up here. Yeah, the Direcaster has something that's similar. It has a way to inflict insanity and an AoE, which is pretty big. It's a 1 hex AoE, and it's only 60% likely to inflict the insanity for 1 turn. Once again, this is only a 1 turn effect, but that can be really, really bad if all those insanities go through on say your units, or it can be really good if you can get the insanity to inflict on your enemies' units. I believe the Umbral Tyrant didn't have a way to mind control people. The Gratitude, no, it's the Enchained Mind, I think works a bit like locking units with the Seal with the Progenitor Golem. I haven't actually played around much with this, but yeah, just keep in mind that there's also this Abductor, which when it consumes a unit, it takes it off of the field, and then when it dies, it comes back on the field. That's kind of like a mind control, but it's more like a temporary stun than anything, because the mind controlled units can attack their old friends. And this guy's great because he reduces status resistance. But yeah, I think that's everything here that has mind control effects. My next tip is that not only can you spot the new umbral gates in the fog of war, but you can also spot the new dwellings. You can see, I see a umbral gate over here on the left, which if we move towards, we should be able to get proper vision on it. Yeah, there you go. There's the umbral gate there. And as you can see in the fog war, this is moving quite a bit, which makes it pretty easy to see. If we move towards it, we should be able to get vision on it. Oh, yeah, I just got to pass 1 turn, and then we'll be able to see that right there. I mean, you can practically tell that it's there already, but I just wanted to prove. There you go. There's an umbral dwelling. And while it might be kind of hard to zoom in and scroll through the map to find them, I find that if you're looking from below above, it's a lot easier to see things that are kind of off in the distance like this than if I'm zoomed out like this and just looking top down. Now, if we go to the umbral layer here, and I just simply move this guy left, we'll be able to see that this is a dwelling. And the way I was able to identify that the first time was just by seeing that there were 2 pips there. You saw there was 2 pips standing next to each other. But if we go here and we zoom in, you can actually see a little bit of lines for the borders of these from far, far away. That's the only other dwelling on the map. If I zoom out and I go over here, you won't see the same lines for like all of the little islands that are in the Umbral Abyss. Typically, when you're looking at a dwelling down here, there's a slight little shine to the border, which makes it something that you can identify as long as you don't have like a lot of glare on your screen. Let me actually just reveal it so you can actually see. Hey, look, there's that dwelling I was just talking about. There's the lines that I was just maneuvering my cursor around. So yeah, you can find dwellings in the Fog of War. You can find umbral gates in the Fog of War, and that's very helpful for deciding where you want to send your armies. If you're going for a build that needs to get to the Umbral Abyss quickly, then you're going to want to be able to find the gates, and you might want to try and find the dwellings quickly. One cool thing you can do with these dwellings is you can actually recruit heroes from them, but you need to take your alignment with them, or your allegiance rather, to the Eldritch Pact, which is, as you can see, pretty expensive. It's saying right now that I'll have Eldritch Pact in 82 turns from basically having this allegiance. But I'm just going to use improve relations to basically get us to the point where now, if I want a hero from them, I could get one that is quite upgraded. It has the Gloom Strider, Umbral Flesh, and Gloom Shepherd, which means if we have this in charge of an army of units that don't have Umbral Flesh, all of a sudden it provides that benefit to everybody in the army. So this is quite a useful leader to get early on, but I don't know how quickly you can realistically get through the improved relationship mechanic on this dwelling. It's something that I need a little bit more time to play around with before I have a strong feeling on these rulers. But on paper, just looking at the stats, looking at the options, they seem great. If you're willing to be friendly with these guys, they seem like a great option. And I don't know if I'd want to attack into this too early into a map. Of course you can, and if you're not taking away HP from the Umbral Maladies, this will be a much easier fight to take on, but sitting here for 4 or 3 turns while you're losing HP will put you in a pretty precarious spot. And of course, these guys, they work like cities, they spawn in guys to go attack you. The neat thing about these uh, connections is, like, as you can see, this one on the bottom left side of the map connects to the top right, and this connects to very close to the other one. So um, you can actually move pretty far across the Umbral Abyss using two gates that are close to each other in this layer, or vice versa. You can move pretty far across this layer using two gates that are close to each other on the Umbral Abyss. So it acts a bit like teleporters in Age of Wonders Planetfall, but you have to take a scary shortcut if you want to in Age of Wonders 4. My next tip is to use void stones with the item forge, because my word, I just noticed this in here. It's really easy to miss because there's so much great content coming with Eldritch Realms in the free update. But look at this. Base attacks deal minus 30%, 35% damage, but ignore all defense and resistance. You basically get to turn your guy into a living fog. That's so good. That's so good. Because people really build up their defenses and resistance, and sure, dealing less damage is kind of like they have some defense and resistance, but it's not more than, I think, 3 or 4 defense or 3 or 4 resistance. That's pretty manageable. And then if we compare this to this Void Stone thing, this can make it so base attacks create the Cleansing Flame, a new thing that we're getting with the DLC. This comes off the T3 tome usually, but you can get it through just, I think, 1 Void Stone. If you want the true damage, that's going to require 3 Void Stones. If you want the Splitterling Infection, you use two. You're going to need 2 Void Stones inside of your territory. This is something that you get in the Umbral Dwellings, and they'll give you allegiance with the Umbral Dwellings while you're down there. Um, but yeah, what units killed with this weapon transform into Splitterlings means you're going to have some pretty good action economy. That combined with the other things that spawn in units means, yeah, yeah, it seems pretty cool. Boon stealing is just taking a positive status effect from the enemy and putting it on you, and I'm pretty sure most of these are the stuff down here would be all things that we've seen before. There may be some things that require like um, a combination of both. I think the things that require more than one type of material are in blueprints, although I don't have any right now. Uh, we could take a look at some of the other effects here. So I wasn't able to find anything in this list that has anything to do with the void stones. And it looks like all the armor pieces work that way, where they don't use void stones. The weapons all have access to the boon stealing, true damage, cleansing fire, and splitterling infection. But I did notice one thing when I got to the ones. There was a ability to summon in a demon, an umbral demon, I believe, and I think this was the only other one that uses the void stones. But as you can see, you can get a random tier 2 through 4 Umbral Demon. That's quite a dice roll. That's very chaotic, and yeah, I love it. Can't wait to see that in multiplayers. My last tip for you all today is to not underestimate this new unit, the Constrictor, which is available in a tier 1 tome, so you may see them pretty early in some of your future games. It's really interesting that this polearm actually has a ranged attack that brings units closer to it. It's the only polearm that I can think of that works like this, and there are very few abilities that actually displace enemies. There's the Warbreed that can push people around. I think there is a ability to drive people back with maybe the mercenaries from the Reavers culture. There's the Thunderbird that can displace people in an area. That's super powerful. And of course, if you got like Cloud in a bottle, you can move a lot of units, not just enemy units, but also friendly units to give yourselves better engagements. I think that this, on top of moving units closer to a melee unit, does this constrict ability. It's incredible. It means that you can say, hey, you ranged unit, you no longer can get away from me and do anything. You're just stuck to me now. I think when I tested this earlier, 70% wasn't actually enough to get this unit pulled towards me. So I'm going to try lowering his status resistance with this. And then let's see, can we actually get you off of the walls now? Yeah, there you go. Now you're stuck. Are you immobilized? Are you unable to walk away? Yeah, I think he got deimmobilized. He's constricted, which means he's basically dead. He's out of the fight now, and I think that's going to be really useful for engaging people on walls. Like as you can see here, is this able to be used in zone of control? Cannot be used with enemies in zone of control. So he's protecting these guys. Ah, you brilliant. Well, unless I can constrict you, and then I can move into that position, right? Yeah, yeah, I think this is actually a really good combination. The sundering with the war breeds or the warhounds, and then saying, "Hey, you, come to me." I can't believe that worked. That was a 43% chance. That was something I didn't test earlier. So, oh yeah, now I've gone and blocked myself. I can't actually bring this guy over here and say I would like to constrict this. But hey, maybe I can constrict you. You get 3 attacks, but you're in a bad spot now. You're closer to me. I might be able to mind control, right? Unfortunately not. Wait, ain't definitely mind control. I didn't need to pull him in closer, but it's definitely an interaction that's there that will make it easier for you to say, hey, you're now under my control, and you can go fight your old friends. Now, before we wrap up the whole video, I did want to mention that the new Sovereign Rulers actually have a ability that synergizes really neatly with the Constrictor's pull effect. If you want to summon in Astral Siphoners, these guys actually have the ability to pull targets close to them as well. So you can just kind of pull a few units closer to you, or you can just pull one unit closer and closer to the units that matter with the Siphoners, with the Constrictors, and then of course there is Tome of Winds, which has Abducting Cyclone. Abducting Cyclone is really good because it's a guaranteed displace, unlike a lot of the other displacement effects. So as you can see here, it says if you try to cast this spell 3 hexes from an enemy, it will choose one of the enemies within 3 hexes to move to that hex, and there is a 90% chance of them becoming stunned for 1 turn. Which is pretty good. Stunning them means that you don't have to deal with them right away. I think displacing them makes it easier for you to kill them off. So in general, that's what I usually use Abducting Cyclone for, but it's kind of up to you. And yeah, that's everything I wanted to say on this topic. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you around. Have a good one.